Hello, everyone. What a day. Because today's the day. Closing arguments in the James Craig trial. The man accused and charged with poisoning his wife of 23 years with arsenic and cyanide and tetrahydrozoline and oleander. And after weeks of testimony and evidence, it is now up to the jury to decide whether James Craig is guilty of murdering his wife, Angela. We are on verdict watch, and we will be on verdict watch during this entire live. If something comes down, we will let you know. Before the attorneys made their final pitches, the judge read the jury instructions, reminding them of something really important. Charges are not the same as proof. Just because James was accused doesn't mean he did it. Each count is simply an allegation, and it's the jury's job to decide if the evidence supports guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. James is facing 6 felony charges: first-degree murder tied to the events between March 5th and 21st, 2023, 2 counts of solicitation to tamper with evidence, 2 counts of solicitation to commit perjury, and 1 count of solicitation to commit murder, connected to things he allegedly did in October and November of 2024. James denied that he murdered Angela. According to him, he ordered the poisons, but he claims it was at Angela's request and that she was the one who wanted them. He also insists that he never gave her the poisons himself. The judge reminded the jury that James is presumed innocent unless they are convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that James is guilty. That's the burden the prosecution carries. And beyond a reasonable doubt doesn't mean absolute certainty. It just means the evidence must make it highly probable that he committed the crime. Each charge against James has to be considered separately. He's facing multiple felony accounts, and the jury could find him guilty on some, all, or none of them. The judge also reminded the jury that more witnesses doesn't equal more truth. It's not about quantity, it's about quality of the testimony. They're allowed to believe all, part, or none of what any witness said, and that includes expert witnesses. Expert witnesses who aren't given any special weight just because of their title. And one of those expert witnesses, by the way, is Garrett Lord. He used a visual aid, Exhibit 79B, but the jury was told they can only consider what exhibit alongside his actual testimony. So that exhibit that Garrett Lord used, only used with his testimony. It's not evidence on its own. And so when it comes to credibility, jurors were told that they can take some things into account if a witness has a past felony conviction, but it's totally up to them to decide how much that matters. How much does the conviction of the witness matter to the juror? And does it affect what they believe? And also, James did not testify, and the judge was very clear that can be used against him. It's not evidence, and it cannot be used against him that he didn't testify. It's not evidence. If you wanted to hear from James Craig himself, that's not evidence. It cannot be used against him. And jurors are not allowed to consider it when making their decision. Both direct and circumstantial evidence are fair game. Direct evidence is something a witness saw or heard, and circumstantial evidence means the facts suggest something likely happened. One isn't more reliable than the other. It all comes down to how convincing it is. Some exhibits had redactions, things blacked out by court order, and jurors were instructed not to guess what was removed. Luckily, I'm not there because I would be like trying to try to figure out what those meant. But they can't. The jurors can't. Even if you're tempted to do that on your own when you get those FOIA docs, the jury cannot. They can only weigh what they were actually shown. And there were also a few facts that both sides agreed to ahead of time. And those are what's called judicial notice or stipulations. So one key example, that a certain letter, Exhibit 44, was received at James Craig's parents' house shortly after it was postmarked on March 18th, 2024. And the jury had to accept that as fact. There were 3 topics that came up during the trial that the judge said can only be considered for very specific reasons. The extramarital affairs, that was only admitted to help establish potential motive or intent. And the same goes for the previous alleged drugging incident, only for motive or intent. And finally, any references to financial struggles or bankruptcy also only to help explain possible motive, nothing more. To convict James of anything, the jury has to find two things: that he committed a voluntary act and that he had the culpable mental state. In other words, it's not enough that he did something. It has to be proven that he did it with the right state of mind, and that has to be shown beyond a reasonable doubt. The judge broke down four possible mental states that could apply in this case. One, intentional. He meant to cause the result. Two, knowing. In other words, he was aware his actions were likely to cause it. Three, reckless. He ignored a clear and obvious risk. Four, negligent. He failed to notice a serious risk that most people would have recognized. Now, based on those mental states, the jury can only convict James of one of the following four charges, and not more than one: first-degree murder, second-degree murder, manslaughter, or criminally negligent homicide. So they have to do one or the other, not more than that. And so let's break down first-degree murder specifically. To convict him of that, jurors must agree on 6 key elements, all proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Number 1, that the defendant is Dr. Craig. Okay. Number 2, that the crime happened in Colorado. Number 3, that he acted after deliberation. And number 4, that he had the intent to kill. Number 5, that the intent was directed at Angela Craig. And 6, that his actions actually did indeed cause her death. So even if one of those elements isn't proven beyond a reasonable doubt, the jury has to move on to the next possible charge. And those lesser included offenses go down the ladder of intent. First, second-degree murder. What does that mean? It means that he knowingly caused her death. Manslaughter means he acted recklessly. Criminally negligent homicide means he should have known better but didn't. And again, jurors may only convict him of one of those 4 homicide charges. If none of them are proven beyond a reasonable doubt, they must acquit. Let's talk about the other serious charges, though, that James is facing beyond just the murder counts. First up, solicitation to tamper with evidence. For the jury to convict on this charge, the prosecution has to prove that James tried to get someone else through his words or actions to change, fake, or present false evidence in a felony case. And it cannot just be speculation. His intent has to be backed up by the circumstances surrounding it. Then there's solicitation to commit perjury. That means James is accused of urging someone to lie under oath, knowing the statement was false and doing it specifically to influence a legal process. And again, the jury has to find intent and that he acted on it. Now, the most serious of the solicitation charges, solicitation to commit first-degree murder. This requires a few key things. The prosecution has to show that James truly intended for someone else to carry out a killing, and that he took steps to persuade them to do it. His words, his behaviors, and the surrounding facts all need to point in the same direction. And for this charge to really stick, the jury has to believe beyond a reasonable doubt that James or someone else in Colorado acted after deliberation with the intent to cause someone's death, and that the death actually happened. Now, separate from all of that, James also faces a manslaughter charge, but this one's a little different. It's related to the claim that he may have helped Angela take her own life. So in this case, the prosecution must prove that James intentionally caused or helped cause Angela's suicide. It's a distinct charge from murder with its own legal threshold. So between all of these charges, tampering, perjury, murder for hire, and even assisting suicide, the jury has a lot to weigh. And for every single one, the standard remains the same: proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, it was finally the time for the state to deliver its closing argument, and Prosecutor Morrow did not hold back. He began by reminding the jury of one simple truth: Angela Craig was innocent. And from there, he laid out what he called 3 false narratives that James Craig has tried to push. Narrative 1, that this was suicide, that Angela wanted to die and she killed herself. Morrow pointed out that James knew Ryan Redfern had already confronted him, that the house was no longer accessible, that the clindamycin bottle and syringe might be discovered. But as Morrow said, the devil is in the details, and James simply couldn't keep those details straight. Narrative 2, the so-called game of chicken. James told Ryan that there was a ring in the package he ordered. And then later, of course, he switched his story and he admitted that it was poison, but tried to pass it off as a part of a twisted suicide pact. He told his daughter that her mother didn't mean to kill herself and that it was an accident and she was just took too much. And then he allegedly tried to round up people to say Angela had been trying to set him up, making it look like James himself was trying to hurt her so she could gain leverage in a divorce. So which one is it, James? But here's the thing, as Morrow told the juror, none of these stories line up. All of these explanations, Morrow stated, can't be true, and none of them are true. According to the prosecution, the core of James's story never made sense. In every version, he supposedly tells Angela he wanted a divorce, and she either can't or won't accept it. And from that point on, we're expected to believe they enter into this super secret suicide pact. He goes to Vegas, comes home, tells her again that he wants to end the marriage. She threatens to kill herself, and after begging her not to for about 16 hours, he suddenly decides to help her go through with it. He says he didn't actually want her to die. He just wanted to help her. But to the state, this wasn't help. It was homicide. And the web of changing stories only made that more clear. The prosecution says this wasn't just a crime of opportunity. It was a calculated plan fueled by three powerful motives. First, James Craig wanted out of his marriage, but didn't want the fallout of a divorce. As Prosecutor Morrow put it, he was done with the marriage, but not willing to go through a divorce. He wanted out, but clean. James had been stuck in a toxic cycle for years, cheating, apologizing, starting over, until he was finally ready to walk away. But he didn't want to give up half of his money. He told his mistress, Carrie, that he couldn't get divorced. And yet, in 2023, he actually talked Angela out of getting a divorce. Why? Well, according to the state, it was because he had another plan. The second motive, his image. James Craig didn't want to be seen as the guy who walked out on his wife and 6 kids to chase other women. That wouldn't look good, especially in his LDS church community. But a grieving husband? Oh, that's a much more sympathetic role. And the third motive, control. When things start unraveling, James allegedly tried to spin a new story that Angela was setting him up. He asked William Walden to find women who'd testified that they were having affairs with him, and he'd repeat that setup story in letters to Nate's ex-wife, Kazi, begging her to help prove it. But it didn't stop there. James allegedly asked a fellow inmate, Casey Bohannon, to plant fake journals, meaning to be discovered. These journals meant to be discovered by members of his church and later introduced as evidence in court. Morrow told the jury it was a setup. He wanted false evidence injected into the trial through others. James also had a hit list from behind bars. Yes, let's not forget the hit list. Inmate Nathaniel Harris testified that James asked him to kill 4 people. At the top of the list, lead detective Bobby Joe Olson. Another name on the list, Roger Crittenden, a fellow inmate. Prosecutors say Craig viewed certain witnesses as threats and he wanted them gone. Letters recovered from jail showed not just resentment, but motive and planning. Even after his arrest, the state says James didn't stop trying to manipulate the outcome. He just changed his tactics. Morrow explained that the jury is now tasked with deliberating on 7 separate counts. Count 1, the most serious. They'll have to choose between 4 possible outcomes. Again, first-degree murder, second-degree murder, manslaughter, or criminally negligent homicide. And the prosecution was clear. There is no doubt this was intentional and deliberate. Morrow reminded this jury, this wasn't a reckless moment. James didn't just snap. He researched, he purchased and administered poisons over the course of 10 days. That's not negligence. That's intent. And it came after deliberation. And about the manslaughter count related to suicide, Morrow said plainly, we didn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this was a suicide because Angela didn't kill herself. So on that charge, the state is asking for a not guilty verdict. Then Morrow addressed the defense's strategy head on. He told jurors, you can't speculate a doubt into existence. There's no witness saying Angela had some hidden laptop or secret iPad where she searched poisons. What if there's one more search, one more device? That's not evidence. He said that's fiction. Now, yes, the defense isn't required to put on any case at all, but they chose to present evidence. They brought in Angela's journals, hoping to suggest she was suicidal. But what that journal really revealed, according to Morrow, was the opposite. It showed Angela Craig was resilient, thoughtful, hopeful, and deeply rooted in her faith. Over and over again, she tried to find light in the darkest moments. She forgave, she moved forward, she had more children. She made her life work. Morrow called her the ultimate marathon runner, someone who endured betrayal, heartbreak, and manipulation for years. But in the end, he said, even her strength could not outrun what happened inside University Hospital. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't suicide. The state says this was murder, deliberate, planned, and cruel. When Angela found out that James had gone to Montana with another woman, Elizabeth Gore, she told her sister Toni that she was done. She was going to leave him after Christmas. She was prepared. She was willing. She was ready to get a divorce. But James, what did he do? He talked her out of it. He didn't come clean. Instead, he lied. He convinced Angela it wasn't what she thought, that it wasn't sexual, that nothing had happened. She wanted to believe him. She told Toni, it wasn't what I thought. That's what she told her sister Toni. But Toni knew that it was, and now we do too. They talked about divorce, but James kept steering her away from it, saying he didn't want one and that maybe things would get better after the holidays. But then came Carrie. Angela found out about her too. And once again, James doubled down on the lies. He told Carrie to back him up, to claim their relationship wasn't physical. And to Angela, he spun a new version of the same old story. He said, I hate that I lit our marriage on fire again and again, he told her. I want to find a way forward with you. To Carrie, though, he called it damage control. He admitted he wanted out, but not through divorce, he said. I'm not happy. I can't get divorced right now. That, the state says, might be the one and only honest things James Craig ever said. So the question is, why not just get divorced? Simple. He didn't want to face the financial consequences. And then just days later, the pressure ramps up. His business partner, Ryan Redfern, slashes his pay and demands more hours. James's life was starting to close in around him. And that's when he reached out to Carrie for help with what he called his shitty problem. He told her about the purge, and he told her that he wished he could poison Angela with no consequences, just like the movie. According to his own timeline in Vegas, he met another woman, Karen Kane. And this relationship, Morrow said, was different. There was no financial arrangement like the sugar babies. Karen actually liked him. She wouldn't sleep with him or be with him unless he was truly single. That wasn't the case with the women he had met on Seeking Arrangements. Those women were put off by his over-the-top gestures. But Karen, she reciprocated. She believed that they were in love. And James, he was convincing. But even if Karen was different, Angela was still the same obstacle. The one thing standing between him and the life he wanted. So what did he do? He got home from Vegas and he immediately got to work. He started researching poisons. He ordered arsenic while Angela, completely unaware, was at home in the kitchen, living her life, trusting her husband. She wasn't planning her own death. She wasn't involved in any secret suicide pact. She had no idea what James was plotting. And the reason for the rush? Karen was supposed to come visit. James had a date, and he wasn't going to miss it. Angela Craig wasn't just collateral damage. She was, in James's eyes, a problem that needed solving. As James begins plotting, his internet search history reveals exactly where his mind was. How to make murder look like a heart attack. Not how to make suicide look like a heart attack, not how to help someone through a suicidal crisis, all while telling Angela that he wants to work on their marriage. He says, I don't want you to feel like you're the only one clawing to keep this relationship together, he tells her. I really was in Las Vegas by myself, he insists. But it's all lies. He's still talking to Elizabeth Gore. He's still messaging women on Seeking Arrangements. Now he's with Karen and he's covering his tracks. Angela, meanwhile, goes on what turns out to be her final vacation, a trip to Utah. She didn't know it would be her last. She was making plans with Tony, dreaming about another getaway to Rhode Island. They shared a love for history and travel for the next adventure. But according to James, that was just manipulation. He says now that Angela was pretending to plan a trip she knew would never happen. That was the story he chose to push. While Angela was still away, James ordered more poisons. He even changed Karen's travel plans, buying himself more time. He didn't know how long Angela would be gone, and he needed her home to start putting his plan to motion. And when she got back, he wasted no time. He mixed up a shaker bottle. He looked up the tetrahydrozoline poisoning timeline, and Angela started to get sick. And when she texted him that she wasn't feeling well, he brushed it off as part of their so-called pact. He claimed her telling him that she was feeling sick was just committing to the bit, right? Committing to this pact they have. But then he says something telling. He texts her, quote, "For the record, I didn't drug you," end quote. Why would he say that if they had a mutual plan? Why would he deny it if she knew what was coming? Because the state says they didn't have any plan. Angela was researching her symptoms, trying to figure out what was happening to her. She wasn't in on it because there was no pact. There wasn't a shared plan. It was a setup. And the symptoms she thought were just a mystery illness, they were the beginning of the end. Angela was getting worse. She goes to the hospital struggling to understand what's happening to her. And what does James do? He goes to work, but not to treat patients. He's caught lurking in the dark using a computer in infamous exam room 9. He's not trying to help Angela. He's trying not to get caught. That same night, he orders oleander, a deadly poison. It never arrives, but it wasn't for a lack of trying. And while Angela is texting him throughout the day, saying she might go to urgent care, expressing frustration and not getting answers, James keeps up the act. He's calm, supportive. But if you believe his version of events, all of this, Angela's pain, her confusion, her fear, was just her committing to the bit. Thursday morning, he's back at it. He emails the supplier trying to get that oleander. Morrow said to ask yourself, if he were a reluctant participant just helping his wife carry out her plan, why go to this much effort? He tells the supplier he's disappointed the package hasn't shown up yet, but he's really annoyed that he doesn't have the poison in hand. That's not reluctance, that's relentlessness. He even drives to the supplier's warehouse, hoping to buy it at the counter, hoping it's in stock, just sitting on a shelf. And when that fails, that night, he makes another move. He doesn't have the arsenic or the cyanide yet. So what does he do at 11 p.m.? He buys 12 bottles of Visine. 12. Morrow joked, well, you know those Mormons love to buy in bulk. But really, Visine at 11 p.m.? Just a sudden need for clear eyes? Come on. And meanwhile, James was playing the role of the caring husband, making shakes, asking Angela how she's feeling. She passes out in the kitchen, ends up back in the hospital. And what's he worried about? He asks when she can come home. And all the while, he's still emailing poison suppliers, telling them he's using oleander for research. Morrow said that calling that a deceptive statement would be putting it mildly. He wasn't helping Angela. He was hunting for the poison that would finish the job. James couldn't even take the week to murder his wife. He was emailing poison suppliers politely, asking for a Saturday delivery. He's trying to get cyanide at the same time, one poison or all of them, whatever it takes. He's polite in those emails, even providing false research reasons for the order. But make no mistake, this wasn't about research. It was about killing Angela. He just couldn't tell that to the customer service rep, Cassie or anyone else. And after getting the eye drops, he could be seen checking the shaker bottle, making sure Angela drank it, walking around the kitchen, syringe in hand, like a man on a mission. The very next day, he's furiously trying to get oleander. This isn't some reckless game of chicken. This isn't a reluctant participant. This is a man working to get the job done. Karen is coming. He has 6 days. He's calling poison companies, making sure everything is in place. And meanwhile, Angela is texting him, quote, "My head hurts so bad." And he's desperate to have her home because it'll be easier to finish the plan there. He wakes up early to go pick up the cyanide. can't even sleep in. He's got a mission and nothing is going to stop him. He tells Angela, I love you. I'm excited to have you home again. Another lie. But Angela believes it. James drives over to Angel Amarine's house to grab the key to his office so he can wait for the cyanide delivery. He emails Cassie, the customer service rep, wow, it's 7:30 and I have been waiting all day, end quote. Clearly, he's frustrated, mad even. This guy is anything but reluctant. And by 12:30, Angela crashes right after James had been in her hospital room. He tells Karen the hospital called him, but then he tells the family he was sleeping next to Angela in the hospital. So which one is it, James? Sunday, the 12th, James doesn't want to reschedule his date with Karen. Angela is still breathing, still in the way. He tells Karen that Angela is blaming him for her illness. He texted Angela, hey, doctor said yes to the clindamycin. But really, he got that just to slip cyanide in the capsules. And finally, the cyanide arrives. And what's in her shaker bottle? Eye drops. He even puts the murder weapon, the potassium cyanide-filled pills, in Mark's hand and makes him, her own brother, give it to Angela. Again, her own brother. Can you imagine that? Giving the brother who loves her the murder weapon and says, here, you give it to her. Make sure she takes it. I cannot imagine Mark and how he feels knowing that. Surveillance footage then showed James in the hospital with a syringe. He gets rid of Mark, says, hey, look, I want to be alone with my wife. And then what does he do? He goes into Angela's room for 60 seconds. 60 seconds. Comes back out. She's gone. He injected her with a lethal dose straight into her IV. And all this time, he's texting Karen. He walks in, murders Angela, and texts Karen. She's crashed. Fast forward to Thursday, the 16th. James writes the first of many statements. He stays the night with Karen. And after being arrested, he writes a letter to his daughter, the so-called Memories Project. He wants her, his own daughter, to create a deep fake video of Angela asking him to order poisons. Because, of course, that's not what really happened. Thus, you need a deep fake. Inmate Casey Bohannon gave police detailed insider information no one else had. Things like the key code passes, the Ford truck, and how to get into a house, his house. And none of that was public knowledge. Prosecutor Morrow didn't mince words. That didn't come from nowhere. That came from the defendant himself. And then there's this explosive letter, Exhibit 43, where James writes to William offering $5,000 per witness, plus a $5,000 finder's fee. He wants attractive women to come forward and say, Angela, set him up. And he even uses code names like Harry Potter and Captain America. He told Causey, Nate's ex-wife, that he told the doctors what Angela was doing. But then he also admitted he didn't want to tell the doctors because Angela wasn't telling them herself. He knew he had to fix the timeline to cover his tracks. Morrow said that to believe Angela's suicide story, you'd have to accept some pretty wild things. You'd have to think she kept this dark, painful secret, willing to hurt herself, manipulate her kids, fool her friends. She suddenly did a complete 180, turning reckless and manipulative. You'd have to believe she'd be willing to die a slow, painful death, abandoning her family along the way. James wanted everyone to believe that Angela was committed to the facade, that she engaged in false searches, sent loving and worried texts, and showed affection. But why would she suddenly go from, I'm leaving Jim, to, I'll kill myself if I can't be married to him? There's no explanation because it's not true. James Craig wanted out of the marriage. He couldn't get divorced. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, there's a suicidal Angela? Morrow said that would make him one lucky guy. But to believe that, you'd have to trust him, be convinced he's credible. And the truth is, he's not. He spent 10 days poisoning Angela, and then he kept going. He could have stopped, but he didn't. James also had a strategy to dupe his own defense team. He didn't just want to fool the jury. He wanted to feed his own attorneys fake witnesses and lies. He wanted his own investigator chasing a third false narrative that Angela was framing him for attempted murder. James also tried to discredit everyone involved. Caitlin Romero, the hero in this story, who opened up the invoice, she faked computer searches, according to James. Ryan Redfern, his partner, the man who came to save his business, oh, he's jealous, according to James Craig. And Detective Bobby Joe Olson, corrupt. Even his office manager gets accused of planting evidence. As Prosecutor Morrow put it, pick any exhibit, and there's a good chance it contains a false statement by James Craig. His letters contradict each other. His timeline conflicts with his own texts. The lies endless and sloppy. But the real Angela, she wasn't manipulative. She wasn't going to self-harm. Witness after witness described her as thoughtful, loving, and planning for the future. She didn't act recklessly. She didn't plan her own death. Morrow closed with this, quote, Angela Craig was innocent. James Craig is guilty. Find him guilty of first-degree murder, end quote. And with that, the prosecution's closing arguments came to an end. And to put it mildly, I'll say it myself, mic drop. And next, it was the defense's turn. Defense attorney Moses walked up and began with a single word, broken. At the beginning of this trial, she told jurors, we talked about that word, broken. This case, she said, is about broken people, a broken marriage, broken perceptions, and a broken investigation. Yes, the Craig marriage was broken, but it was theirs. And like many long-term relationships, it was complicated. James had cheated repeatedly. There were secrets, there were lies, but there was also care, tenderness, acts of affection, and love. You saw it, Moses told the jury. You saw the videos, how they spoke to each other, touched each other, how they raised their kids together. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And James Craig, she said, wasn't a monster. He was a man battling addiction, anxiety, and shame. A man completely broken by the time he was arrested and thrown in jail. And then Moses turned to what the state said about motive. The prosecution offered not one, but two motives. The first, financial. But Moses pushed back hard on that. She said, yes, James had money issues in the past, but at the time of Angela's death, things were finally looking up. They owned $1 million home outright. No collectors were chasing them, no liens on their property. There may have been some old IRS stuff, but it wasn't catastrophic. James had finally started improving at work. Ryan Redfern even said that January and February were good months. Moses told them James made changes when he was told to. And for the life insurance policy, it wasn't recent. Angela had a policy on James too. Most married couples do. It wasn't some sinister move, just a shared plan. Moses stood in front of the jury and told them plainly, there was no financial motive here. Moses absolutely didn't shy away from James Craig's worst qualities. She looked the jury straight in the eye and said, in essence, yes, this man was a terrible husband. He cheated constantly. He was unfaithful for years. But that, Moses argued, wasn't new. Angela knew. The marriage had survived wave after wave of infidelity. And so now, after 23 years of this, it suddenly becomes his motive for murder? Moses asked. She reminded the jury of something else. Angela had been encouraging James to go to work. He was at the office often, not to scheme, but to keep the business afloat. Family members were pitching in to help with the kids. This wasn't some man spiraling into evil. This was a man trying in his own flawed way to keep things going. And yes, Detective Bobby Joe Olson described James Craig's demeanor as flirty. But Moses didn't argue that. Of course he was flirty, she said. It was part of the pattern. Overlapping relationships, emotional manipulation, sweet talk, compliments, promises of the future. He told women he was thinking about divorce. He told others he was getting divorced. He said whatever he needed to say to whoever he needed to say it to. It wasn't ugly. It was dishonest. But it wasn't new and it wasn't murder. So congratulations, Moses said to the prosecution. You proved beyond a reasonable doubt that James Craig is a serial cheater. But cheating, she argued, is not a motive. Cheating does not mean that he killed his wife. We got a rare and intimate glimpse into James and Angela Craig's marriage, a view that most people never saw. And yes, James minimized the cheating. He wasn't honest about it, not to others and often not to Angela. He wasn't honest. But Moses said, if you look at their messages, if you watch the videos shown in this trial, you do see something else too. Tenderness, kindness, love, a long, complicated history. The defense didn't argue that this was a healthy marriage. It wasn't, they told the jury. That 23 years of being let down, 20 years of infidelity broke Angela, broke her heart, broke her spirit, broke her soul. And they pointed to her journal, raw, heartbreaking words that she wrote long before she died. Back in 2009, Angela wrote, quote, I feel so lost and so alone. The less able I feel, I can forgive. I am physically ill, and it just gets worse. I feel abused, worthless, unwanted, not just sad, but depressed. I feel a huge sense of loss with no hope. End quote. Angela's journal, her own words. And the defense asked the jury to sit with that, to imagine what it must have been like for Angela year after year, hearing apologies, apology after apology, being promised change, believing it, and then watching it all fall apart again. She wrote, I can't help but think it's me. I'm not what he wants. It almost killed me when I wasn't enough and he didn't love me. The weight of everything is crushing all the air out of me. Should I give in? End quote. Those were her words, her pain from years ago. And the defense reminded the jury, we don't have Angela's most recent journals. But if that was her reality in 2009 and 2018, what must have she have been feeling in 2023? What was the emotional toll of this kind of betrayal again and again and again? During that trip to Montana, James was with another woman. Angela found out. She told him not to bother coming home. I hope she was worth it, she said. And by that point, Jim and Waffles wasn't a secret anymore. Seeking arrangement wasn't a secret anymore. Angela had done a deep dive and figured out everything again. And the emotional toll, it just kept adding up. Her heart kept breaking and she kept trying to make sense of it. Tony, Angela's sister and closest confidant, she testified that Angela said she was feeling broken. But then she walked it back, told Tony it wasn't what she thought, said James had explained everything and she was staying. But her words were tangled, contradictory, conflicted, and Tony said something that stuck. Angela didn't like worrying people. So even in the middle of heartbreak, frustration, and betrayal, Angela shaped a version of the story her sister could live with. Because she knew Tony would push back. Tony would ask hard questions. So Angela crafted a narrative, not because it was true, but because it was easier. Angela was a mom of six. She was private, isolated in many ways. She didn't want people knowing what was really going on in her marriage. She was angry, hurt, exhausted, and by her own words, broken. Given everything she had been through, none of that is surprising. The defense pointed out family meant everything to Angela. They believed in eternal, forever families. We heard from two of her children, and even they didn't know the extent of what was happening between their parents. Angela had become more distant over the years, even from her closest friends. Nikki Harmon said that after James told her what was going on, Angela blamed Nikki for not being there and barely spoke to her after that. And Michelle Redfern, one of Angela's once best friends, hadn't heard much from her recently either. Angela wasn't opening up, not about the cheating, not about the pain, not about the devastation. She didn't want anyone to know just how deep the damage went, how many times James had broken her. And now we move into March. The defense played a key moment during closing, a recorded argument between James and Angela. Angela says, quote, no one in their right mind would ever think that I would kill myself. Name one person. It's your fault. They treated me like a suicide risk, that nothing I said could be believed, end quote. And James responds, quote, I didn't say you did this to yourself. I just said you should do a drug panel because you were accusing me. I wanted that for me too, end quote. Angela doesn't hold back. Everything's about you and you weren't there for me, end quote. Defense attorney Moses pointed to that fight, arguing that James did ask her about getting a toxicology screen, and Angela got upset. She said the relationship was intense, raw, and emotional, but still human, and that there were big gaps in what people saw. Angela had been to urgent care with Annabelle. James wasn't there. She was angry. She was hurt. She berated him for not being with them. And this is where the defense brings up the word manipulative. Annabelle, their daughter, couldn't think of any real examples of her mom being manipulative, except one story, and it was about parental guilt. But now, Moses suggests this was actually spousal guilt, the dynamic between James and Angela behind closed doors. She also pointed out that up until March 15th, everyone believed James was a loving, attentive husband. No red flags. No one suspected anything. And now, Moses said, people are rewriting history. She referenced Mark, Angela's brother, who testified that he was upset James left the hospital for a long stretch and didn't tell anyone where he was. But Moses asked if Mark was that mad, why did he text James asking if he was hungry, saying he was starving, and even using emojis? The point the defense tried to make, people didn't think James was acting strangely until after everything happened. Their perceptions became broken, to use their word again. But behind closed doors, Angela and James had arguments. They kept those conversations private, like much of their marriage. On March 15th, everything shifted. That's when, according to the defense, police locked in on James Craig and stopped looking for any other possibilities. Moses pointed directly at Detective Olson's testimony. She said there was a blurry object in James's hand in hospital surveillance. Footage? Now, it's suddenly a syringe. But Moses points out no syringe with poison was ever found. Not at the hospital and not tied to James. And sure, the Craig home had syringes, but police didn't collect them. Detective Olson said there was a sharps container in a dead-end hallway in the hospital, implying James could have dumped evidence there. But Moses argued that hallway had an exit, one used by James. One used by James. And Mark and Renee, and they used it. They used that exit. And anyway, there's a sharps container in every room, not just at the end of this dead-end hallway that isn't dead-end with an exit. So why wasn't it collected? Why wasn't the syringe collected? Olson said the lab wouldn't take biohazard evidence, but Moses pushes back. It wasn't about protocol. It was just too late. The evidence is gone before anyone thought to get it. Broken lenses, he said, referring to a broken investigation based on tunnel vision. They don't get to pick and choose based on blinders, Moses told the jury. She also pointed out that investigators took photos of pills on Angela's nightstand, but didn't test them. You'd think she was poisoned, she said. Then why leave it? Why not collect it? Then she turns to the prosecution's theory. They want you to believe that James Craig tampered with capsules, resealed them so perfectly no one noticed, and somehow slipped in cyanide, which then magically left no trace, no spill, no mess. That's fantasy, not fact, Moses said. No cyanide was found. Jurors were also reminded of the scene in the Craig kitchen, the blender bottles, the drinks, but there were no assigned cups, no names, no warnings. Everyone grabbed drinks freely. There's no evidence Angela was targeted with tetrahydrozoline, Moses argued. You don't know who poured that drink, and you don't get to guess. Angela went to urgent care, but the prosecution never followed up. No medical records, no context, no explanation. Moses challenged that directly. You'd think it's important. Then prove it. They didn't, and you can't speculate. From there, Moses turned the focus back to what he repeatedly called a broken investigation, one filled with blind spots, blinders, and preconceived narratives. James Craig and everyone deserves better than broken lenses. Take the testimony of Dr. Lear, the pathologist. Moses reminded jurors that Dr. Lear had limited information, no access to Angela's mental health records, and reviewed the evidence through the state's lenses. She called the death a homicide based on speculation, the very thing the jury is instructed not to do. You've got to take off the blinders. Take the blinders off the narrative, Moses said. She then revisited the now infamous March 15th call between James and Ryan Redfer. James said they were playing a game of chicken. Moses asked the jury to think about that. How else could he explain that kind of dynamic in a quick phone call? She said. It's something that had been going on for years. That same day, March 15th, Angela wasn't feeling well. She was in her hospital room and supposedly said that her arm hurt. Moses questioned if that was true and James wanted her dead, why would he notify the nurses? Then there's the issue of digital evidence. Angela was seen lying in bed with a laptop during her hospital stay. There were iPads and laptops all over the house, yet police never collected them? Why not search them? Moses asked. Take off the blinders and look. What was Angela searching on those laptops? What were they afraid to find on those laptops? She acknowledged that yes, police got the cell phones, and yes, they had James's timeline, so they knew to look deeper, but they chose not to collect Angela's devices. Then she went back to the issue of the letters and James's statements. This isn't about whether you believe one letter and not the other. They don't get to pick and choose. They can't ask you to believe what James said to one person, but dismiss what he said to someone else just because it doesn't fit their version of events. And finally, Moses returned to the scene at the hospital. By the next day, the state already had their theory. They believed James killed her, but they still decided not to take the medicine sitting on Angela's nightstand. She addressed the claim that James was allegedly pressuring hospital staff about medication. They want you to think he was hounding the nurses, but he only sent one text, Moses said. And about the tetrahydrozoline, the eye drop chemical allegedly used to poison Angela, Moses was direct. We don't know who put it in the cup. You don't get to guess. And if James really was trying to kill his wife, why didn't he clean up? The shaker bottles, the nightstand full of medication, he left it all there. The prosecution wants this to be simple, but it's not. Moses urged the jury to take a step back. If you really look at everything, you'll see it's not as simple as they want it to be. Because their marriage wasn't simple. It was complicated, messy, deeply flawed, but also full of nuance. This isn't a case about whether James Craig was a good husband, Moses said. That's not the question here. Yes, James made terrible decisions. He lied, he cheated, he broke trust repeatedly. And in jail, facing the collapse of his life, he was desperate. And yes, he made even more bad choices. But desperation doesn't equal guilt. They have to prove their theory based on evidence, not guesses, not leaps of faith, Moses said. When you're back in that room, look past the speculation. She reminded the jury, this isn't about whether you like James Craig. It's not about whether you sympathize with the family. This is about evidence, not emotion. And then she addressed the elephant in the room, the letter James wrote to his daughter while in jail. Yes, he wrote it. And yes, it's heartbreaking, Moses said, but it's not an admission of guilt. It's the act of a scared, desperate, innocent man, she told jurors plainly. You don't get to leap. You don't get to fill in the blanks. The law doesn't allow it. It demands certainty, not hunches, not bias, not emotion. If you hesitate, even for a moment, that's reasonable doubt. And with that, Moses concluded, quote, it's hard for me to sit down knowing they get to stand back up because this is their case. But on behalf of James Craig and our entire team, I'm asking you, please listen, look closely, take off the blinders, look at the evidence they did show you and the evidence they did not show you. He is not guilty of murdering Angela Craig. So there you go. That was the defense's closing statement. But then it was time for the prosecution's rebuttal. And to begin the state's rebuttal, Prosecutor Brackley acknowledged the defense's right to a fair trial and the presumption of innocence, something he said that everyone, including James Craig, absolutely deserved. He even praised James' attorney and called their work on this phenomenal. I always have a hard time with that word. Phenomenal. They did a good job. But now, he says, it's time for accountability. He told the jury that the evidence is clear, and when they use their common sense and follow the credible acts, there's only one reasonable conclusion. James Craig is guilty. Prosecutor Brackley briefly addressed the lesser charges, saying they don't apply here because James Craig didn't just snap. He planned this. He researched what to buy, how much to buy, and then spent days slowly poisoning his wife. That's first-degree murder, not second. Brackley acknowledged the case is messy, complex people, a complicated crime, but he said the facts speak for themselves. The police did their best to follow the evidence, and while they may have had to revisit the scene, James is the one who wrote cyanide in the written timeline. Brackley told the jury, this isn't about speculation or missing evidence or what evidence could have been found by police. It's about what James Craig actually did and the evidence that has been shown. Prosecutor Brackley shut down the idea of assisted suicide, calling it exactly what it is, a defense built on James Craig's words and nothing more. He told the jury there's not a shred of evidence that Angela was suicidal. No texts, no journal entries, no conversations with friends or family. Every claim about suicide came from James through fake letters, fake instructions, and fake narratives he created. Angela, Brackley said, wasn't trying to die. She was fighting to live. In her final days, she was texting loved ones desperately, trying to understand what was happening to her. She Googled ER location. She begged to go home. She texted her husband, her killer, and said, quote, "You made it look like I'm doing this to myself," end quote. That's not suicide, Brackley told the jury. That's fear. That's a woman being poisoned, not a woman choosing to die. And while Angela lay dying in a hospital bed, James was writing a timeline that blamed her. He wasn't grieving. He was covering his tracks. Brackley put it plainly. He said, while she died, he typed. While she weakened, he schemed. That's not a grieving husband. That's a murderer, end quote. As Angela lay dying, James Craig was texting Karen Kane, taking photos outside the hospital, writing his timeline, preparing to blame Angela, and even told staff her last words. Angela's 2009 and 2018 journals describe the damage James had caused. But in one recent text, she wrote, "You are more important than my day," end quote. She was still trying to save the marriage while arsenic was on its way. Angela Craig was not broken. She showed strength. She protected her children. She stayed hopeful. Brackley said he never broke her spirit to live. He only broke her body. Brackley explained that's not resilience lost. That's resilience betrayed. So why didn't James just file for divorce? Because Brackley said he could not afford it. Divorce meant financial exposure. It meant consequences. Murder was his way out, clean, he thought. But his texts, his searches, and his own words betray him. Brackley then outlined the countdown to Angela's death. On February 27th, James starts poison research. On March 1st, he orders arsenic. On March 6th, Angela is poisoned. On March 8th, James orders cyanide and buys Visine. On March 14th, he blends the final smoothie. On March 15th, Angela is essentially brain dead. On March 17th, Karen Kane arrives. James planned it step by step. Brackley closed with this. He said, quote, "This isn't about perception. This isn't about suicide. This is about murder. Angela Craig died because of what he did, with motive, with method, with intent. Verdict is now in your hands," end quote. And with that, the jury has officially begun deliberations. After weeks of testimony, dozens of witnesses, and hours of closing arguments, it's now in their hands. Jurors 14 and 15 who had been selected as jurors, they are now alternates. They've been selected as alternates, have been formally dismissed. They've been instructed not to discuss the case with anyone unless they are called back, and to avoid all contact with attorneys, witnesses, or anyone involved in the case. The remaining 12 jurors are now behind closed doors, weighing the evidence and working toward a verdict. Until they do, court is in recess. And so now we wait and have been waiting. We'll even see what is been going on. Do we have? She just said, okay, we just checked. Still no verdict. So that means it's almost 5 in Colorado. So they'll probably go home soon. Maybe we should hang out a little bit longer to find out if they announce that they do. Of course, there's not a lot of info coming out of there fast. Thank you, everyone. I see that we have 4,300 people in chat. Thank you for being here. Thank you, R.D. Woodruff, for reminding everyone to hit the like. I appreciate that so much. And Ada, I love this. Please do not ask why Angela didn't leave him. Emotional abuse is complex and has a cumulative effect over years. Completely agree. Exactly. Exactly. All right. It's good to see you, Gossip, Rumor, and Innuendo. Love your channel. How long have they been deliberating? Gosh, how long is it? Yeah, about 4 hours. It's a long time, right? I mean, let's take a drink to that because I always say I can never predict a jury, right? It's been 4 hours. It's kind of longer than I thought it would take, I'll be honest. So, I'm wrong once again. Thanks, Katie Bug. I appreciate that. Thank you. Martha's asking verdict tomorrow. I hope, because I mean, look, here's the thing. I'm not there today in the courtroom. You know, I've been watching on WebEx with my media credentials, but there are options in other courtrooms I've been in where if the jury is close to deliberating or close to getting to a verdict, they don't necessarily have to go home at 5, that they could keep the courthouse open longer. So that's an option, right? Like technically, if they allow that in this situation, then certainly we could still have a verdict tonight. But if they're not close and they have all this evidence left to go over, then it's likely they'll choose to go home when the courthouse closes at 5 and come back again tomorrow to continue their deliberations. But I think it also depends on where they are and what the courthouse is willing to let them do. Thank you, fellow Lauren. Sending you so much love from England. Thank you for listening from England. Dawn M, let him sweat it out tonight, if not today. I'd love to know what all of you thought about the closing statements, arguments. Share your thoughts here. I, of course, miss the chat when I'm talking so much, so I don't always get to see what everybody is thinking. Patty Mason, thank you for being such a wonderful mod. Thank you. So good to see our moderators here. We have an amazing moderator community. Stephanie, thank you so much. Oh, wow. Chilling, Chelsea. I worked in an ER and ICU, and I wonder how many people were actually poisoned. Yeah, right. I agree. Thank you, Mitzi. I agree that the rebuttal was amazing. I thought the closing arguments were incredible from both the defense and the prosecution. I thought the prosecution nailed it. I thought the defense did what they were able to do, which was to try to show, reasonable doubt, that there's reasonable doubt in this case. I don't think they pulled it off, but they did a good job with what they had. But I thought the state was just incredible in their closing arguments and in their rebuttal. Artie Woodruff, you need to go watch the closing arguments. You can watch them here. Yeah, they haven't been posted yet that I know of, but who needs closing arguments when you have hidden true crime? No, just kidding. Thank you, Stephanie. I would love to know. Oh, you use that word, Kelly. Let's see if I can say it. You are doing a phenomenal, see, there we go, job. It makes me nervous. We appreciate you from New Orleans. I have these certain words that I can say in my everyday speech, but when all of a sudden I'm like on display, like in front of people, this has happened since my anchoring and reporting days. I'm like, oh no, I'm not going to be able to say it. And I get nervous and then I can't. Phenomenal is one. Community is another one. See, I was able to pull that off. But if I had to say it for like a news bit, I'd be like communion. It's funny. So thank you for proving to me that I can say that. I appreciate you. Thanks, Kelly. Oh, Troublemaker Baker saying the jury has gone home for the day. Okay. That is okay, confirmed. They will return Wednesday morning. So we will certainly be on verdict watch. Here's a question for all of you. We did this for the Lori Vallow Daybell case. We had a verdict watch going live where you could all be in chat and we sort of wait and I could come on and off. If that's something that's of interest to you, let me know here in chat or in comments. Megan Music, so good to see you too. And let me know if that's something that you would want. Let me know. Yes, you'd vote yes. Yes. Okay. Troublemaker Baker says that would be fantastic. Well, that holds a lot of weight, Troublemaker, because you make verdict watches fun and less stressful. So if you're in, okay, I'm seeing a lot of yeses. So we will do that. Also, I want you guys to know tonight, Courtroom Confidential, Josh Ritter with Courtroom Confidential, he's going to be on with me later tonight. It was another reason we wanted to go earlier with everything that happened with closing statements because I have some questions for Josh. He's a prosecutor. He's been a defense attorney as well. And so put your questions here in comments and join us tonight. I believe it's are we going to do 7:30? 7:30 Pacific time. So do your time code. Look, we'll have it scheduled soon and then you'll know. Because luckily when we schedule something on YouTube, YouTube puts it on the right time zone for you. So you will know. So, all right. Okay. So see us then. And we'll be asking Josh all of our questions. Like I said, I think for me, one of the most interesting things about this case and the verdict are these other options. Like the fact that he could be charged with criminal negligence or manslaughter because he assisted in a suicide is really interesting that they could have a lesser charge, right? So I have a lot of questions for Josh tonight. So again, put your comments in chat. And it looks like, everyone wants a watch party. That's what we'll call it, a verdict watch. And then I'll just say this. I'm a little stressed that they went home for the night. I do believe that justice will be served. And, there are 7 counts. There are other things they have to decide besides whether or not he is, charged with first-degree murder. There are also perjury and witness tampering and all sorts of things. So I am going to assume that is possibly why. But, it's not, they're still deliberating. So we will have a watch party. So we will be scheduling both a live with Josh Ritter tonight to ask him all of our questions and then a verdict watch party tomorrow. And for those of you that listen on our podcast ever, if you wouldn't mind leaving us a nice podcast review, what I mean is Apple or the podcast app. It helps us so much. And I noticed that so many of you, when we asked, it's never something we've really asked a ton for, but thank you everyone for your kind reviews. So for those of you that say my eyebrows are too high, they're my real eyebrows. I do dye them and they go up really high when I do this because wow, but anyway, other than that, thanks for your good reviews. Still the person that said that did still give me a good review. So, yes, gossip, rumor, and innuendo. You can host our verdict watch party next time. We hope to have you in chat as well. Everyone go check out her wonderful channel. She's doing a great job over there. You give us the needed laughter at times, covering really dark, hard stuff. So thank you. All right, everyone. We'll see you tonight and tomorrow. Thank you to our incredible moderators. We'll see you. Bye-bye.